Today we are going to cover the very last part of Be Quiet's newest Silent Wing 4 series, the Silent Wing 4 PWM. Not that we have covered everyone in existence, I just prefer to pretend as some of them just don't exist. Before we start, however, I would like to remind you that the high-speed version that we have already covered is like a one-to-one copy of this one, except for the fan speed. So therefore I will just save myself the hassle and just copy-paste half of the script from the original video. If you have already watched that one, do yourself the favor and skip to exactly this timestamp to get the benchmarks, cause there will be zero difference. It's the same thing at a different speed. Similarly to how the 120mm lineup works, there are three separate versions of this fan. The high speed, the one that we are going to talk about today, called PWM, and a Pro. And similarly to the 120mm lineup, between all three versions, there is literally zero optical or feature-wise difference. It's the same freaking fan with a different motor. You will not be able to keep them apart, and good luck for trying. The only indication is the sticker in the back. That being said, there are significant differences to the previous Silent Wing 3 lineup. For the last decade, Be Quiet had a wing design with 7 very big but just slightly bent wings. And due to aging reasons and the fact that somebody noticed that static pressure actually is a thing, Be Quiet decided to switch this up for their new Silent Wing 4 line. For the 120mm lineup, they went with a 9-wing design with a lot smaller wings but bent quite aggressively, which contributes to the fans pushing the air a lot harder. Additionally, Be Quiet ditched the octagonal thing for a regular round inlet and outlet and enlarged the central area with an all-new matte black logo slapped on top, which I, by the way, believe is amazing. For the 140mm lineup, of which we are right now looking at the 140mm PWM, something changed again. Instead of those 9 wings, we now have 7, but hey, they are still a lot smaller and bent more aggressively. How this will then affect performance, we will see later on. Comparing the new 140mm lineup to the previous one did reveal even more changes. The first one is their speed. Instead of the previous 1000 RPM, the new ones are spinning at 1100 RPM while pushing 51.3 CFM at 0.92mm of H2O. And compared to the older one, this means that we actually lost quite a bit of everything. But don't judge too quickly, because the fan blade design might have changed a lot of things. But before we cover that, let's finish up the fan. Although there are many changes made, the packaging ain't one of them. The Silent Wing 4 come in almost the exact same box as the original one. A bunch of imagery, a bit of specs, and inside we'll find 2 separate boxes, one with the fan and the other one with a bunch of accessories. Again, similarly to the older Silent Wing 3, the new 4s have a separate pair of mounting edges for regular fan screws. But unlike the original, removing them is as easy as pressing in those edge pieces with 2 fingers and pulling them away, and then just press the new ones on. It's very easy, not at all harmful, and then you can just install the fan using regular fan screws. The mounting edge system that comes pre-installed are the pushpin edges. These can be used by simply positioning the fan wherever you want to, and then install them on a case, mind you, and press in the pins from the other side. Very easy, and they will keep in place surprisingly well. As a small detail, which is very poorly explained, like I saw it somewhere on the presentational sheet for the new Silent Wing 4s, and I am not able to re-find it. I don't know where that feature is mentioned, but it is there. The pushpin edges are reversible, but the 2 sides are not identical. One of them is marked with an S and the other one with an L. Though I'm not sure what this actually means, I guess space and low, maybe, I don't know. But the L has like a tiny piece of rubber sticking out, meaning that if you would install the fan, for example, in the back of the case with the L side going behind the fan, as it is originally out of the box, you would end up creating a very tiny gap between the fan and the case. And by reversing those, you would take away that small gap and make it completely stick against the mesh filter. Now, although the gap will probably not change anything performance-wise, it can change something regarding noise. There are instances where a specific combination of a fan blade design paired with a mesh filter can produce a horribly annoying sound. As the perfect example, noise blocker and basically any mesh structure. Horrible combination without a gap. Therefore, we have that tiny little knob. If you experience that horrible sound, make sure to switch the edge pieces to have that gap, and the noise is gone. It's really that easy. As a last mini point, we have a 4-pin PWM cable that the fan is powered by. It looks identical to the previous versions at 500mm length and some random sleeve on there, but considering that I know how the cables look like on the Pro line, I do hope that Be Quiet just wanted to use all of their sleeving material and on PWM headers, and that with the next generation or even like new product batches, we will see a switch to the new one. I sincerely hope that. With everything covered, let's get to the benchmarks. While setting the Be Quiet Soundwing 4 140mm PWM spin at its max 1100 RPM, it managed to keep the CPU at 58 degrees C above ambient. This positions it at the exact same spot as the 120mm counterpart, which is quite interesting because the smaller one is spinning about 500 RPM faster. I guess this means that 3 CFM are worth more than about 0.7mm of H2O at that level. Also, an interesting comparison would be the noise blocker B14PS, which are spinning at 100 RPM faster. Yeah, that's pretty brutal if you ask me, but on the bright side, considering the noise that the noise blocker ones are producing, it's kind of okay again. But let's wait for a second with that cost. The most important comparison that I can actually provide for once is versus the previous gen. And at that front, Be Quiet made a huge advance. 9 degrees C uplift is a huge deal and is a very, very good job. And that's not only limited to max performance, because on the noise to performance front, it looks just as good compared to the previous gen. The old one have literally zero chance against the new deal. Very, very well done. Once we throw in every other fan, the noise to performance ratio looks pretty much identical to the high speed version, plus minus a couple of measuring tolerances of course, and sure, it's a really, really good ratio, but in the end the conclusion will just be the same as for the 120mm versus 120mm high speed version. Why bother? If you are going to pay the exact same price, why go for the version that has close to zero overhead, while you could also go for the exactly the same priced version and enjoy the advantage of having the exact same amazing ratio, but simultaneously having a massive overhead which you maybe need to use at some point in the future, but you can push that down with a properly set up PWM curve. I just don't get it. So exactly as I said for the 120mm version, don't go for the 140mm PWM. Go for the 140mm PWM high speed. It has all of the advantages without the brutal disadvantage of being crippled. Who would have thought? It's like after the 120mm version, it's not like everybody knew what would happen. Be Quiet kinda played themselves with that fan. But okay, this should be it for Be Quiet's new Silentwing 4 PWM in 140mm form factor. At this point, a huge thank you to Be Quiet for sending them over. It was a hell of a ride to test all of them, but if you haven't watched it already, have a look at our take on the Pro lineup. If I would need to choose which fan to go for my new rig, you can bet that it will be a Pro. Just because, you know, why not? On a side note, we now also have channel memberships, so if you're looking for a good way to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's a pretty good way to go. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to get another dose of that darknet stuff that made me forget about the 120mm PWM Silentwing 4 fan. I have no idea how it performed, I didn't even know it existed, it was written in the script. It works. Anyway, thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.